Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and very, very warm welcome to the annual Durrell London Lecture. A little bit of a difference this year, and we hope that you will find what we are going to tell you this evening both of real interest to you, but also inspiring as well, and of course very much in line with the Durrell philosophy. The important thing, of course, is to make sure that at the end of the evening we have shared with you our vision for what it's going to be like once we have got through the process of regenerating the Dalnacardoch Estate in the Scottish Highlands. You will hear more of this story through the evening. My name is Stephen Dalton, and I have the privilege of being the chairman of the Durrell Scotland Board, a slightly separated board looking particularly at the regeneration of the estate. Much more of that later on. Our intention this evening is to seek your support as we embark on our 100-year programme to return Dalnacardoch to a natural, fertile and sustainable future. And we hope that by the end of the evening, you will have a clear picture, a fuller appreciation, and will be with our passion for a better understanding of our plans for the effective and long-lasting regeneration of the estate. You'll be aware that the Durrell Wildlife Conservation Trust was set up as a development of Gerald Durrell's passion and vision for how to regenerate and how to restore and retain and sustain wildlife in the world. But we want to go further, and in the aim of that plan, we looked around for where we could find somewhere of the scale and size and landscape that will allow us to take forward the idea of a complete regeneration programme. And the estates in Scotland is about the nearest we could come up with because of the need for that scale. We intend to build on our contribution to conservation and to work from beneath the soil to the top of the native Scottish trees and above, to regenerate the significant and beautiful estate in the Scottish Highlands. And so, ladies and gentlemen, Durrell Scotland has been born, and now it needs nurturing. However, events such as tonight's would not be possible without the fulsome support of some strong and long-term partners. We're extremely grateful to the Royal Bank of Canada, RBC, as we've been fortunate at Durrell to have the characteristically generous support and sponsorship from RBC for many previous initiatives. Indeed, RBC's current brand campaign, talking about how ideas happen here, of course, fits very well with our own ideas for what we want to do up in Scotland. RBC's support goes deep within the organisation, and we are very grateful for the wonderful fundraising efforts of their employees, who have accumulated thousands of pounds. These funds have enabled dozens of young people opportunities to develop essential conservation knowledge, as well as receive career guidance and meet inspirational experts and work alongside Durrell's conservationists. Thank you, RBC, and we very much hope that you and our guests will all enjoy this evening's special event. We are fortunate this evening to have secured some fantastically and inspiring speakers to describe our Scottish enterprise. So let's get started. To take us through this evening, I'm delighted to welcome one of Durrell's most enthusiastic supporters, Monty Halls. As many of you will know, Monty is a passionate conservationist, lifelong explorer, and TV presenter. Monty has been an inspired and lifelong exponent of Gerald Durrell's vision to protect and regenerate the natural world. Monty is no stranger to these annual lectures and has been a Durrell ambassador since 2018. Ladies and gentlemen, I very much hope you're going to enjoy the evening, and Monty, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, and thank you very much for turning out this evening. There's a golden rule of public speaking, and that's you never talk politics. Yes, exactly. But I'm going to break with that golden rule because I think there's things that need to be said. And it very much centers around the sort of work that Durrell does, the group of people we've got gathered together in the room this evening, the extraordinarily inspirational people you're going to meet, you're going to see speak, the future of wildlife filmmaking, of communication, etc., etc. What a great evening to celebrate those things, because as of this morning, the world changed. And we all know that the world changed. There's a danger of thinking that somehow the efforts of organizations like Durrell, of initiatives like this, are somehow reduced by what happened this morning, and the tectonic shift in attitudes towards climate change and the environment, and I disagree with that. I think that things like this, initiatives like this, organizations like Durrell, they become doubly, triply, quadruply significant, and people like yourselves who support those efforts become even more significant and even more important in the current climate and the current environment. So thank you so much for being here. A friend of mine gave me a poetry book, and it talked a little bit about what they call the warrior emotion. The warrior emotion is hope. And I think for evenings like this evening, they generate that warrior emotion. There's a lovely quote in it from a guy called David White that said, "You were more marvelous in your simple wish to find a way." And that's what I think Durrell does. And your support tonight allows us to find a way. So that's really, really significant. So, okay, on with the show. Again, I'd like to add my own thanks to RBC for supporting this event. You know, without backing like that, these events simply don't happen. So it's invaluable and helps us do the work that we need to do and put these events on, of course. Now, every now and then, you're very lucky in that you get a glimpse of the future. You get a glimpse of a sort of dynamic, irresistible force that is changing the way people think about the natural world, is communicating with great passion and great skill about the natural world. And that's going to be our first speaker. So I'm just going to, in fact, I don't need my glasses. So our first speaker tonight is a Scottish wildlife filmmaker and TV presenter, Libby Penman. Libby has a passion for highlighting Scotland's amazing landscapes. And just a quick word from me on Scotland. It's lovely to be here tonight. I'm a sort of plastic jock, really. I'm a tall, posh English bloke called Monty. But I've always sort of wanted to be Scottish because it's literally my favourite part of the world is Scotland, and particularly the west coast of Scotland, where you can stand with your heels on a great continent and your toes in a mighty ocean. As one of the locals said to me up there, "Hey, welcome to a place where the land is water and the water is land." So a really beautiful, special part of the world. Obviously, we filmed the Great Escape series up there on the west coast of Scotland in the Outer Hebrides as well. And I trained there. That was the birthplace of the Commandos, Scotland. So it's a very, very special place. Gavin Maxwell was my great hero when I was a kid. So it's wonderful to be here tonight celebrating that part of the world. Libby's got a passion, as I said, for highlighting Scotland's amazing landscapes and creatures, and believes adventures and time spent in the outdoors can give us a more meaningful connection to nature and inspire us to want to protect it. This evening, Libby and I are going to have a little chat, during which she's going to share photos, video clips, and stories from her experiences and favourite animal encounters, as well as her first impressions of Dalnacardoch. I've been getting a hard time, by the way, from over there about the way I pronounce that. So, Dalnacardoch, from her recent visit to the estate. But first, the best way to introduce Libby is show you some of her work. a warm welcome to Libby Penman.
There we go. Started.
So, Libby, right, sorry. Can you start by introducing yourself and what you do? Although we've got a fairly good idea from what we've just seen, I think.
Yeah, so I'm a wildlife filmmaker. I direct and shoot documentaries. I'm sometimes in documentaries. Later on in my career, I've started to be in more things. I make sort of nature content on social media. I try my very best to get people excited about the outdoors.
You're a communicator, basically, I think. People like Libby, by the way, infuriate crusty old filmmakers like me who work with a team of 25 and things like that, and you go off and create this extraordinary stuff pretty much on your own, don't you?
Well, a lot of the time, especially after the pandemic, you have to be quite self-sufficient, so I'll go off and shoot, edit, drone, be in things, mic myself up, just crack on and do the best you can, basically.
And you didn't have the most kind of conventional route into wildlife filmmaking, did you?
No. So my sort of, and I'm going to show you a wee clip, one more clip only, I promise, but it's a sort of origin story of where this all began, because my sort of route into filmmaking was actually at the skate park. I was totally obsessed with becoming like a professional skater when I was younger. And then I've literally broken my arm countless times. And one summer, I had a cast on all summer, and I was so obsessed with being at the skate park, but I couldn't skate. So I started filming everybody instead and making YouTube videos, and it just totally snowballed. And I realised that that's what I wanted to do for a job, be a filmmaker. So that was the sort of beginnings of everything. So, well, I'll show the clip. And
please do, please do.
This is sort of beginnings and all the different adventures I've been going on around Scotland, basically showing off different outdoor adventures and wildlife.
I know it seems completely unrelated, like skate park filmmaking to animals, but there is quite a lot of similarities for me. One of them being it's a dangerous working environment, like wildlife. Another is that your subjects are always moving like really fast. So I wouldn't know it at the time, but me following BMXers and rollerbladers was like perfect practice following animals. But this was honestly like my wildlife training ground, the rare skate park species.
So the otters here are coastally adapted Eurasian otters, but these ones are even more adapted in the sense that they're really used to humans being in their environment. This one is actually using man-made structures to eat its larger prey items, the bend of the pier, the fishing markers and buoys. And it's bringing them on and eating them there as like floating weed diners, that's helping it conserve energy. Work smarter, not harder, eh?
As is often the way with wildlife, that was a bit of a frantic mad dash scramble, and then it just all came together. So absolutely buzzing with that. Yeah, I'd set up at another spot slightly along the harbour, but then nothing was happening, and I was getting absolutely frozen. So I had the cormorants to keep me occupied, but yeah, the dolphins were just not playing ball. And then I saw one move on the other side of the wall of the harbour, so I was like, oh, I'm in the wrong spot. So I made a quick, frantic scramble over to here, and it totally paid off. Just watching the footage back, I'm absolutely buzzing. Dolphins leaping out the water is just sheer joy. It's just amazing that we can be in Glasgow, one of the busiest spots in the whole country. But if you just take yourself down to the river, can brave out the cold for a wee bit and just stay still, you can actually see some of the most intricate and delicate wildlife behaviour. I'm absolutely over the moon to have been watching a kingfisher fishing. I'm not sure there's anything more stunning than watching that wee blue bird. So it's been just phenomenal to get those shots. Very, very happy.
Quite surreal, but I'm actually at COP26 today, and myself and a group of wildlife filmmakers are about to present a series of short films and clips, including some from this project, about the changes we want to see in the industry. We want wildlife filmmaking to be more honest about the true state of nature, and we want the system behind the camera to be fairer. We're about to have a panel discussion with some of the heads of the whole industry. Wish us luck. Cameron had described this first cave to me as like entering the pitch black belly of a whale, and I totally got that. Navigating the kayak through echoing, crashing waves in the dark
with some entrance to this adventure.
That was absolutely crazy. Yeah, I feel like I'm in an Explorer video game, but it's absolutely awesome.
It's 80 feet underground, and this one's not on any maps.
When we think about the climate crisis, the archetypal image in everyone's head is obviously melting ice. How, as someone that spent their life hanging off ice, how does it make you feel? How do you think it's affecting this sport?
Okay, that's that. Simple enough. Let's hope the rest is as smooth and easy. I can't open the bag. Right, okay, we're on to something. Here we go. And voila, we're in business. I mean, for me, the view right now, looking down at what I've just come up, is amazing. This sort of experience and taking this skill set out into like Ben Nevis or something, I mean, Scotland's just the perfect playground for this sort of activity.
Okay, the mums just got up and left the nest, and I have to say they're kind of sitting there looking like, well, sitting ducks, very, very exposed. And considering I've just been filming a very hungry heron on this same stretch of the river, let's see how this all goes. That's the thing with filming wildlife, you get so invested in what's going on in their lives, it can be quite difficult sometimes to leave and start going about your own human business for the day. So yeah, I'm going to have to pack up and go, but I'm definitely going to be back very soon to keep an eye on what's going on over here.
Very good, very good. Every wildlife filmmaker I know is a bit of a maniac. And your laughter when you filmed that dolphin, it had a hint of sort of maniacal laughter about it, and I sort of recognised that.
That's because I was so cold I couldn't feel my hands at this point.
Of course. Well, we'll come to that in a moment, by the way. So, Libby, you've touched on how you ended up getting into wildlife filmmaking. And now you've been in it for a little while. Is there a why emerging for you in terms of the big picture? You can see your enthusiasm for the wildlife, but is there something going on with the big picture for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think I've always super driven about images and like shooting different documentaries, making them look good and exciting and like getting people invested in stories, but always an affinity with animals. There was like a pond beside the skate park, so, you know, I've always spent a lot of time around animals, and when I was sort of experimenting as a hobby, you know, filming regular stuff like the swans in the pond beside the skate park, suddenly I started thinking that if I could, and at this point in my job, I was doing a lot of work at, you know, BBC and different places, freelance filmmaking for, you know, arts documentaries, music documentaries. So I was filmmaking loads at a sort of professional level, but it wasn't necessarily always about the stuff like I really cared about, which was spending all my free time in the outdoors on these mad adventures. And then I think I really just started to think that I wanted to combine the two, and if I could be filming animals and filming outside and have all the camera stuff going on, it would be like the dream scenario. And then I just wanted to do that every day, and I think, as we know, everything is changing so rapidly with the state of the world all the time, and it was sort of in the run-up to COP26, and I live in Glasgow, and it was COP26 was going to be in Glasgow, so everything was there, this big momentum around, you know, environmental issues, and it just became really obvious that that's what I should be focusing my storytelling on. So that was the sort of segue into it, and now I just want to be outside doing this every day, basically.
Well, that leads to the next question, because you talked about the otter being, you know, working smarter, not harder. And of course, the currency of what you do is time, and the ability to sort of suborn your own discomfort and to just sit there and get the shots, become part of the environment. And that requires a certain level of sort of feral, you know, blending into the environment, doesn't it? Are there any shortcuts to these shots, or is it just dedication and time?
Yeah, I mean, definitely no shortcuts. Everything takes a long time to get these shots. And to be honest, like you say, like Scotland, I mean, I love Scotland so much, but it is a really difficult environment to work on, which, you know, is no mean feat for what we're about to undertake with the project, you know, over at the site, because, you know, the climate, it's difficult, it's cold, the weather is always, the only reliable thing is it's always unpredictable. So it's like, everything's always stacked against you in Scotland. So you've got to really...
Midges.
Yes, midges. You've got to really, really love being there to sort of put up with all that. But like, even when all that sort of stacked against you, I still kind of just want to spend all my time trying to get these images, basically.
And that's what sort of drives you to get up on a rainy morning when you'd much rather be in bed and all that. It's that end product, is it?
Yeah, I mean, the thing about, people say all the time, well, you have to have a lot of patience to get these sorts of shots and things, but it's also like, the way I see it is a lot of the time, most of the time, you don't get a picture like this on a daily basis, else it would be so easy. You would have like reams of great images. So mostly, it's like days and days of work or months. It took me best part of 2 years to get 60 seconds of kingfisher footage I was happy with. But you have to have a wee thing in the back of your brain that says every day that you think the wildlife is going to turn up, that you think it's going to be a success, else why would you even try, basically? So I think that's kind of my motivation. Like every single day, I think, even though I guess statistically, it's unlikely the otter is going to just spring out the water in front of you. But I always think it is going to do that. So that's kind of what motivates me.
There's a reflection of another time. We were trying to film otters in Scotland when we spoke to a grizzled old crofter called Donald MacDonald.
Nice.
And we said, have you seen, where are the otters? And he says, I've actually been bitten by an otter. And I was like, no way, what happened? He said, well, I was strangling it at the time. So that's a sort of old school mentality.
Yeah, I've never done that.
They didn't used to like him. And do you have a particular kind of career highlight? Do you have something that really, and all the array of extraordinary experiences you've had, is there something that really stands out?
I think it's been a bit of a whirlwind lately, to be honest. So there's loads of really cool stuff that's happened that I'm like really proud of and like really excited about to be involved in. This year, I got to be on Springwatch when they were doing the live broadcast from Scotland, and that meant a lot to me because I spent so much time. I did my master's degree during the pandemic, so all I could do was film local wildlife that I could actually walk to from my flat. So I'd spent so much time invested just like on things on my doorstep. So when I was able to go on Springwatch and do like the live shoots and like you sort of bring to life some of the stuff I'd been spending a lot of time around, that was like unbelievably exciting because everyone watches Springwatch. So it's like you're used to watching it and it motivates you to want to film wildlife. And getting to do that was really awesome.
And so obviously communicate, because that's communicating on a mass scale, isn't it? And if you communicate that, people learn to get invested in it, and then they want to conserve it, and that's a really important. Your images and your communication skills are really key in that. And that's bang on message for what Durrell does as well. And a recent survey found that the UK was 59th out of 65 countries in Europe in terms of wildlife engagement. So that's really important kind of ongoing work. And there's always a fascination with like the iconic animals overseas, the poster boys, the keynote species and all that. How do you think people can connect a little bit more with the wildlife closer to home?
Yeah, I mean, like urban wildlife, especially for me, is like super important in that exact idea because the majority of people in Scotland and the country live in urban spaces. So when we think about all these mad wildlife adventures, of course, we think they're going to be really remote, but actually some of the best wildlife moments I've ever had have been walkable. So a lot of the time it's been really interesting because I think I see the same people when they're out walking their dogs in Glasgow. They now like recognise me because I'm always by the river filming. So they used to ask what you're up to because it looks a bit strange, like you've got like a long lens camera with you and you're doing all this. And now the same people I recognise like kind of know what I'm up to and I'm trying to get like the kingfisher footage and things. And it's just always, it's actually been so nice to literally see members of the public come over and be quite engaged in wildlife in that sense. And when I was filming the peregrine falcons in Glasgow, they'd be sort of looking up at the cathedral, and people would be like, "What on earth are you looking at?" And I like, they'd come up to me and I'd kind of be like, "Look at my camera, I'll show you." And they'd be like, "Whoa, what's that? It kind of looks like a pigeon." I'd be like, "No, this is the fastest creature in the world.
It's the world's deadliest pigeon."
Yeah, it's like, and then they're like, "Wait, what?" And then you explain a little bit about the significance of that animal they're looking at, and they're literally just a person that's walked past you on the street. And suddenly they're quite excited, and it's like, oh, you just want to, like, that in a nutshell is like, okay, actually getting these images creates quite an impression on people that would not think to be that engaged with this. So yeah, like all these things, like the kingfisher is the one that sticks out the most because it took so long to get shots I was happy of it. It was my arch nemesis for a long time, and now we're on great terms, and I film it all the time, and it's just it's my favourite like local wildlife thing that I've ever sort of got to film, really.
There's two aspects of your work that I think are really important. One is the communicating on a mass scale, and I went to an event that David Attenborough was speaking at, and he talked about that, about wildlife filmmakers like yourself. And he said, it was to a group of wildlife filmmakers, he said, you are the natural world. to most people, you present them with the natural world. It's such important work. But the other thing is being on the ground and actually talking to people who say, what are you up to? And making them aware locally of actually what's around them. And again, that segues quite nicely into Scotland. And, you know, we tend, because obviously, you know, that's firmly your DNA, that's your home. And we have a perception of Scotland as being this complete wilderness, this wild, beautiful place. But of course, it's a landscape. It's been shaped by man. Yeah, radically shaped by man, isn't it? Great forests eradicated and peat bogs, etc., etc. And part of this project, which is immense in scale and scope and ambition, is this 100-year program to essentially revive a substantial area. In your experience, and you've got deep experience of these environments, do you think that's possible?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Like, it goes... The way I think about that is like the way I think about wildlife. You wouldn't turn up at 4 o'clock in the morning in the freezing cold rain if you thought, well, there's no animals that are going to turn up today. You only turn up because you think, of course, this is going to happen. So it's like, you have to have like unrelinquishing optimism for this is going to work. And I think the more time you spend with people doing conservation projects and you see the success stories and stuff, it's like all the motivation you really need to be like, of course we can do this. Like, why? You wouldn't begin any project if you didn't think it's possible. So I think seeing things getting done in Scotland and what the plans are, like, it's deeply special because I'm like, I love this country, I really care about it, and you want to see it flourish and not even just like, you know, maintain things. You want to see it like, you know, be amazing as it should be. So it's like, I think there's a lot of like really, really important work happening and going to be, getting undertaken basically.
Of course,
so,
of course. The 3 rules of wildlife filmmaking are the same 3 rules as conservation. And they are persist, persist, persist. Those are the 3 rules, basically. And so obviously your passion for Scotland shines through. Can you try and summarise in kind of one word or one sentence why Scotland is so special and is worth investing in for this type of project?
I mean, again, we're talking about wildlife, so the last thing you'd initially think, okay, I'm going to say this, is people. But really, Scotland is amazing because, like, the personalities, the attitudes, the culture, all of that, which is very much part of the wildlife, the landscape, like, all of it, if we talk about an ecosystem, we're not separate to that. So I think that's what's so amazing about Scotland. Like, it's bringing in everything, it's bringing that all to the table. Like, there is, there's funny people, it's just a great place to be. It's vibrant, and I think the landscape is incredible. There's obviously a lot of work to be undertaken to sort of repair things that have obviously gone a bit awry, but you know, it's an amazing place, and I can't wait to see what's going to happen over there.
Churchill said about the Scots, he said, there's only one problem with the Scots. There's not enough of them. That was his quote
I could get on board with that one. That's quite good. I like that.
Yeah. Well, again, that segues neatly with the work being done at Dalnacardoch. Is it Dalnacardoch?
Dalnacardoch.
Dalnacardoch.
Right. I'll probably be in trouble for saying it wrong too, but I think that was...
So, as I said, but that's a perfect segue. So you recently visited, didn't you? So what were your impressions of the area?
I mean, it is a vast area, and that, again... like anything to do with environmental issues or conservation, I guess that could be, you could view it as this is a bit daunting or this is a bit overwhelming because of the scale of it all. But even on a day, particularly like today, where, you know, massive challenges in the world and, you know, we face adversity and things, and you can't help but think it's even more special now to think, yes, this is a big challenge. Things get more difficult by the day. But actually, like that, you have to use that and use that as motivation and drive. And so it's my first impression is, wow, what a massive site, but that represents a lot of opportunity then. So actually a lot of good can be done because it's such a big place. everyone that I spoke to so far about the site has told me about, oh, did you see the golden eagles and the owls? I didn't see any of that on my visit. So as a wildlife person, I kind of fell short on that regard, but definitely reason to go back because I'd love to get some shots of them. And also the work they're sort of doing in terms of right now, getting a benchmark, an idea in terms of conservation of what's there already, how the state of play basically. Like that is super exciting in the sense that there will be such solid record of like, we know the state of play now and we're going to be able to see this all the way through. Like you don't often get an opportunity to see change in effect like that.
That
baseline
cool data is so important. It's so important. And rewilding is a really controversial term, isn't it? You know, reviving a landscape is a much better term. What do you think a great end product would look like in 100 years? Sorry, it's a massive question.
That is a big question.
But don't worry,
you're very on the spot.
You've got 20 seconds to answer. So.
I think, so in terms of what I would like to see, I mean, I think the work that's going to be done, it's not about like us going in and completely managing everything. It's about facilitating nature to do its thing and to run its course. So I think that's what's going to happen. Like there's such good people working on this that it's going to facilitate what we need to happen for nature then to take over the reins, I think. And yeah, I mean, it would be amazing in coming years and later on. I mean, 100 years is a long project, so maybe I won't be the one taking the shots, but someone else will be there taking the wildlife shots. So yeah, it'd be really cool. I would love to take some photos and stuff there at some point, and then down the line, someone else is going to have a completely different view in front of them. And yeah, that's pretty exciting.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, Libby, we've run out of time, unfortunately, but anyone... I'm sure you get asked a lot. I get asked a lot. How'd you get into wildlife filming? How'd you, whatever. And anyone here tonight and meeting you for the first time, you've answered 98% of that question by your energy and your drive and your focus and your commitment and your determination to tell these stories. So keep doing what you're doing. I think you're a wonderful ambassador for the future. So thank you so much.
Thanks a lot.
Cheers.
Thank you.
So thank you so much, Libby. And ladies and gents, on to our next speaker, and that's Andy Ford. So Andy is the Director of Nature and Climate Change, so buy him a drink afterwards, from the Cairngorms National Park Authority. Andy has a degree in ecology from Sunderland University and over 30 years' experience working in countryside management. He's worked as a ranger and a nature reserve manager in Scotland, England, and West Africa before joining the CNPA in 2005. This evening, Andy will talk about the transformational vision for carbon negative and biodiversity-rich national parks with better functioning, better connected, and more resilient ecosystems where people and nature can thrive together. So please welcome Andy.
There we go. Well, thank you very much. And as always, really, really difficult act to follow. Thanks for that. It's great. When I was putting these slides together and listening to Libby's presentation and everything, it really reminded me of the decision I took to move to the Cairngorms about 20 years ago. And I was working in and out of West Africa, short-term contracts, this, that, and the other, and we just put a bid, the consultancy team had just put a bid in to work at the Okavango Delta. And at the same time as that bid was going in, there was a brand new national park being created, Scotland's first act as a devolved Parliament alongside Access to create a new national park in the Cairngorms. And they both came off. And I'm here. And when I told my friends, oh yeah, I'm going to go for the Cairngorms one, they sort of looked at me and went, are you sure? You did hear what the other one was, didn't you? It was the Okavango Delta. Except one friend. And one friend of mine worked all over the world. He just looked at me and he went, yeah, I get it. It's the Cairngorms. And he's absolutely bang on. I mean, it is a world-class national park. This is a bit of the boreal forest, the bit that stretches around from Siberia and Canada, and there's a little bit of that dragged down into the Cairngorms. It is the largest remaining area of semi-natural woodland in the whole of Britain. It's the most extensive area of surviving Caledonian forest. In just 6% of Scotland, there's 25% of Scotland's entire native woodland resource. It's got aspen woodlands in it that you don't see anywhere else in the UK. It's got the best examples of bog woodland, and it stretches for 20 or 30 kilometres. The mountains which give the national park its name are renowned as being one of the wildest landscapes in the UK. It's this great bubble of granite that's blown up out of the landscape, 20 kilometres by 30 kilometres, an upturned dish, and this ice cap sat on the top of it without moving, and it's left this really extensive high ground, the largest area of high ground, over 900 metres in the UK. I keep going to see that. I keep going to saying the biggest, the best, the most. It's really hard not to talk in superlatives when you talk about the Cairngorms. High winds, freezing temperatures, species that you would find in Norway rather than anywhere else in Britain. This is like a little bit of the Arctic, dragged 800 miles south. 4 of Scotland's major river systems start in the Cairngorms. The UK's largest natural functioning floodplain is in the Cairngorms. This is the braided river of the River Feshie, the best example of a river doing what rivers want to do. The human hand on the tiller has been held more lightly in the Cairngorms, so the fields and the farms and the crofts that we have in the lowlands are species-rich grasslands full of waxcaps buzzing with birds and bees. The wet grasslands that we have there are home to some of the most important UK mainland wading bird populations. Again, I keep getting tied up with all this, the most important. And some of the species that live there are outstanding. 25% of the UK's rare and threatened species find refuge in the Cairngorms National Park. Red squirrels, crossbills, crested tits, golden eye. I'm not going to list all 1,200, but just to give you an idea. And of course, the round endangered capercaillie. It is a bit like, when you're playing top trumps and you're playing top trumps wildlife, and you start coming up and you go woodlands, yep, 10, mountains, yep, 10. Oh, he's got the Cairngorms card, hasn't he? But let's not get too complacent about this, because these are challenging times. In fact, challenging is the worst of euphemisms. This is a crisis. These are emergencies. There should be blue lights flashing. This is an image of the populations of freshwater pearl mussel in the park. 90% decline in freshwater pearl mussels in the last decade. 90% of those mussels have been ripped out of riverbeds by flash floods, tearing gravels out of the rivers. Average temperatures in the national park have gone up by 2 degrees in the last few decades. That means that all of those snow beds that were up there from the mountains, you can't rely on those anymore to provide steady and clean supplies of fresh water. It means the temperatures in the upper tributaries have increased. 27 degrees is the highest recording temperature in one of those upper tributaries. Young salmon get stressed at anything above 23. They die at 33 degrees. So our systems are not working very well at the moment. And not all of the land in the national park is great forests and fantastic rivers. Quite a lot of the national park is heavily grazed and heavily burnt, not allowing for those natural regeneration, not allowing for that structural and species diversity that we know we need in the uplands. A lot of our rivers are heavily modified. Over 40% of the spey is abstracted in its upper reaches. And whilst 19% of woodland cover in the national park is high in UK terms, it's nowhere near the European average of 40%. Every single hectare of land must be asked the question, what is it doing to tackle the twin crisis? And every single pound of the public purse that's spent on those hectares of land must be asked the same question. Generations of effort went into creating these landscapes for more productive agriculture, for the timber that we need, for the water that we need, for the energy that we need. Our grandparents created the landscapes that met today's society's needs. Well, now we need to create the landscapes to meet our grandchildren's needs. That means we need to do things differently. The same way that we need to travel differently, we need to shop differently, well, we need to farm differently, we need to forest differently, we need to hunt and fish differently. The impacts of this flood were absolutely catastrophic for farmers, but we can't build our way out of this situation. We can't keep having higher flood banks, and we can't keep repairing the flood banks that we've got. The sustainable solution is to make space for water in this landscape, to work with nature, or to make nature work for us. But who's paying for these flood services? Who's paying for flood resilience? Who's paying for clean water? Because it can't be the land manager, and the public purse won't cover it as well. But these are business services as well. The developers who are developing houses at the end of this river are relying on the land managers in the upper catchment, on the land, on nature, to provide them with good, clean water for all of those houses. How do we tap into that and make that pay for the UK? We need transformational change at all levels of society in all sectors, and that includes the conservation sector. This is a piece of ground in the national park where you've got young trees regenerating out onto dry heath, and the dry heath, the heather, is protected for what it is. X number of years ago, we designate it, we said, this is a protected site, this heather is important, we need to keep it. Now we have trees growing on it, and we're going to have to rip those trees out or burn them out because we want to protect the heather, because that's what the legislation says. Also, there'll be some species that live in this heather which we are considered to be globally endangered, like curlew. Well, actually, if that landscape's going to change, that means that we might have fewer curlew. We might have fewer of these globally, locally, regionally threatened species. Are we prepared for that? And the changes that we're doing, the changes that we're asking of land management, do we have all the research and all the evidence that we need? Because ecosystems are phenomenally complex. As John Muir said, as soon as you start to pull away at anything in nature, you find it's connected to everything else in the universe. But if we need to move at speed and we need to move at scale, we're going to have a different risk appetite. And risk appetites aren't an academic exercise. This is people's lives and livelihoods that we're talking about here. Land is the bedrock of economics and cultures. In many parts of the national park, there are communities which are still remote and rural and fragile that are dependent on farming and forestry, on agriculture, sporting. And if we're going to come along and say, oh, hang on a minute, let's have a look at this support system. Let's have a look at the way you're doing it. Do you mind if we just change this bit? Then quite rightly, those communities are going to go, whoa, hang on a minute. That's what we're standing on. None of this is easy. Tricky questions. But that's what we've got national parks for, and that's what we've got places like Dalnacardoch for. Because that's where we can innovate. That's where we can test these solutions. That's where we can work in partnership together to find the new models of land management, to find the new ways of supporting people who live in these landscapes. And since becoming a national park in 2002, we now have 23,500 hectares more woodland than we did 20 years ago. Now, I gave this talk last night in Edinburgh, and I said, well, that's 6 Abernethy forests. And I said, oh dear, that's not going to work here, is it? So I've been desperately trying to find a new metric, and the best I can come up with is that's 2.5 forest of Deans. Now, that means nothing to me, but I'm hoping you're all going, oh, that's impressive. We've repaired 7,000 hectares of the 52,000 hectares in the park that are degraded. We've invested £16 million in repairing those peatlands. We've created hundreds of new jobs, and we've developed a scheme of private finance whereby we can see some of those profits going back into the communities. We've repaired over 100 kilometres of rivers, putting these large woody structures, as they're rather clumsily called, back into the rivers, giving the rivers a natural nudge, letting it create its own pools and riffles and streams, somewhere for those young salmon to hide away from temperatures and from predators. And the interesting thing about this is that either side of that river, it's still agricultural land. We're not saying this is a river for nature, this is a field for agriculture. We're saying this altogether is helping us. And we've released beavers, and we've released wildcats. So we now have 2 more species back in the countryside, one that we've not seen for 400 years, one that's not been functionally, it's been functionally extinct until very recently. And both of these species are causing their own issues. You might see some of the news around beavers. One of them is damming ditches and flooding agricultural land, and the other is eating pheasants and game birds and people's chickens. But can't blame beavers, they like eating chickens. All of that work, the peatland restoration, the species conservation, all of that has brought tens, nearly hundreds of millions of pounds into the national park. And we don't go around giving it to beavers and stucking it in ditches and tucking it under birds' wings, we give it to people. And in all of this change, in all of the changes in land management, all the changes in funding that's coming in, we have to make sure that the people are the ones that benefit from it. Because if we're going to need transformational change, we have to make sure there's no one part of society, no rural bit of society that has to carry the tab for all of that, but we have to make sure that they receive the benefits as well. The last few things I wanted to say really were about the size and the scale that we work at in the national park. And we've kept hearing the word scale quite a lot, but that is what we do in the national park. This is a map of nature networks. It's like the green national infrastructure that we need. It's our version of HS2, except we're actually going to try and join them all up. If we need species to move around in the landscapes, and we know that we do, if we need to build these green infrastructures that support our country, then we need to work at scale. And I'm not very good at this, but down in the bottom left, the southwest corner there, with that great big orange splodge, that's Dalnacardoch. And you can just see how important that bit of ground is in joining up all those different bits of the woodland, the big cities that we've got in those great forests, making those woodland highways, because that is the speed, that is the scale that we need to work at. We can't go planting little bits of woodland here and there all over. We need to think of these like big national infrastructure projects. This is the land in the national park that's managed principally for ecosystem restoration. A mixture of private land, NGO land, public land. We've a target in the national park to have 50% of the national park managed principally for ecosystem restoration by 2045. Bit of a mouthful, 50 by 45. Here, you can see where Dalnacardoch fits into that picture. Because if we are going to look at the ways in which we restore functions, if we're going to look at the way that nature-based economies support people and livelihoods, then we can't do it in little bits of pockets here and there. We in the Highlands know what 150, 200 years of sporting management looks like. I can tell you what people are going to wear in the pub, I can tell you what they're going to be talking about, I can tell you what they'll be doing tomorrow. What does a nature-based economy and culture look like? Well, we won't know until we build one, and we'll only build one at scale because you can't do it at an estate level. We have to work together, and we have to show that we can do it. And with Dalnacardoch in that picture, part of that picture of estates all with the same vision, then we can start demonstrating the art of the possible. I'm just going to finish because it's easy to colour them in and say that's ecosystem restoration and that's not. But it's not that simple. Of course it's not. All of these landscapes all do lots of different things. All of them are at different stages in the journey. Not everyone's trying to get to 10 on the rewilding scale. Some are starting at 2, some are starting at 6. And Dalnacardoch will have its own journey. It's got its own starting point. It's got to have its own end point in 100 years' time. Well, in fact, that'll probably be like the middle point or whatever. But it's that journey that we're really, really happy that Dalnacardoch is now part of. We in the national park cannot build a functioning ecosystem without places like Dalnacardoch. And Dalnacardoch won't be able to do what it does without being in the biggest, the best, the UK's most, the biggest, the fastest, the best, the longest, part of the UK for nature. But then I'm bound to say that because I chose to be here rather than the Okavango. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Andy. That was wonderful. Wonderful. So now that's the perfect warm-up for the main event, which is about Dalnacardoch. So hopefully we've set the stage this evening, hearing from Libby about Scotland's incredible landscapes and wildlife, followed by Andy and the inspiring aims for the Cairngorms National Park. Our next speaker is Durrell's Programme Director for the Dalnacardoch project, and that's Deirdre Stewart, who joined Durrell at the start of the year. Deirdre grew up in rural Inverness-shire, where she gained a fundamental grassroots knowledge and understanding of her interests in land management, inspiring her career focus on estate management, conservation, and the management of wildlife in upland Scotland. Studying countryside management at the University of Aberdeen and thereafter qualifying as a chartered surveyor, she has worked for over 20 years in the management of rural estates. What attracted her to this role was her desire to support and facilitate sustainable change in Scotland's upland management. Before we hear from Deirdre and the Dalnacardoch project and Durrell's vision for the future, I'd like to share with you a short film, Reviving Dalnacardoch.
This land has many stories, passed down from father to son, grandmother to granddaughter, across the ages. But the story of this land was not only written by the forces of nature, it was penned by the hands of man. A story that goes back thousands of years to the first settlers who began clearing the great forests, carving out their lives in the shadows of its towering trees. Where generations shaped the landscape to their needs, turning the wooded hills, the peatland and glens over to sheep, cattle and crops. Until the ancient forests of Atholl spoke of Cairngorms, the rocky hill of the sheep, and Sochan no Boban, streamlet of the white cow. Where above the loch's barren shores, a few trees lingered, sparred by fate, beyond the plough's reach or hungry bite. Then the treeless land was planted for timber. Row after row, shoulder to shoulder, spruce grew and fell, and little trace of bird or beast was heard or seen. And peatland was cut to warm the cold stone of homes, then later scarred by trenches and gullies to be drained dry, till only arid earth remained. But in the depths of the bogs lie echoes of time before, a glimpse of a story yet to be written by the hands of nature and the people of this land. A story of tomorrow, of restoration and healing of wounds, where nature leads and humans follow, and man and the land stand together. Among hillsides of rowan, birch and pine, where fauna and flora flourish in the shadows, and the chatter of birds and beasts fill the air. Where burns and rivers meander, cloaked in ribbons of gold and green, their borders guarded by willow and aspen. Where parched peatland is now replenished in endless pools that carpet the land, and sphagnum mosses grow and thrive. Where young trees grow in the mountains and glens, the lost trees and species return once more for the people of this land to share in its wonder. It's a story of the bond between people and nature, of building a healthier and vibrant future with the people and the land at its heart. A story we can all believe in.
Good evening. What a wonderful venue it is here tonight. I'd really like to thank Sir Stephen for welcoming us here, to Monty for giving us a warm welcome too, and Libby, thank you for giving us a lens into your work, but I can't help but think that you're maybe the one to watch, I think. And Andy, thank you for such a meaningful presentation into the Cairngorms National Park, which we know has such an important role to play here, to play in Scotland, but also for giving me the context in which I can now introduce to you the Durrell Wildlife Conservation Trust field programme at Dalnacardoch. For those of you who I haven't met before, which I guess is most of you tonight here in London, my name is Deirdre Stewart. I'm Programme Director for Durrell Scotland, and I'm the project lead for Dalnacardoch. So I know you're all fairly familiar with Durrell, but what I wanted to help explain was why Scotland. Durrell had outlined its ambition to work in the UK within the Trust's Rewild Our World strategy, which was launched in 2017. The organisation were looking for a landscape-scale restoration project for several years. The strategy described how Durrell would undertake a landscape-scale rewilding project to restore wild habitats and ecological processes, using our skills to bring back missing iconic wildlife and ensure local people would benefit. Scotland is the only place in the UK that has the scale required to fulfil that vision, and Dalnacardoch provided the perfect opportunity with its location within the Cairngorms National Park. Leasing the Dalnacardoch Estate enables us to fulfil this ambition and demonstrate our approach to saving species, to restoring ecosystems, to connecting people with nature, and training conservationists. It is thanks to the generosity of a family foundation and the support of the trustees of a family trust that we can now undertake this ambitious project. For those of you less familiar with the geography, a quick few slides to let you get your eye into where we are. I know Andy's helped with us a little bit. Scotland, wider Scotland there, the darker shading obviously highlighting the areas of high elevation. And the next slide here, which helps you identify the Cairngorms National Park sitting centrally within Scotland, and the red arrow pointing to where we are located at Dalnacardoch. And lastly, again, where we sit on the southwestern fringe of the national park. So, formerly part of the Great Forest of Atholl, Dalnacardoch Estate extends to a small 18,500 acres. The estate is accessed directly from the A9 carriageway and is served internally by only one single track along the river corridor. Dalnacardoch just sits just east of one of the great dividing lines of the Highlands called the Pass of Dromorter. Once an important route for drovers and soldiers, it remains one of the most important lines of communication within the Highlands. Dalnacardoch is an upland estate comprising predominantly moorland at elevations from 1,000 feet at the entrance gate to over 3,000 feet on our Munros and high plateau on the northern boundary. We are the sole occupiers of the landholding with no leases nor agricultural occupation. The River Edendon is very much the artery of the estate, and it flows from the northwest to the south through Dalnacardoch. That's the geography lesson over. Okay. Now I'd like to introduce you to the team that we have on the ground at Dalnacardoch. And for me, this has been one of the best things about joining the field programme at Dalnacardoch. So this is Kevin Simpson, and he's our head stalker. So now, Scotland is a fairly small place. You know, I can come down here and I don't imagine I'll bump into too many folk that will know me, but Scotland is very, very different. But I can't begin to tell you how I felt when at interview with some of the Durrell team and with the head stalker in the room, I remembered something around 25 years ago and being in his company somewhere in a gun room, I think in deepest Inverness, maybe 25 years ago. And I was trying to concentrate on the interview questions, and all I could think was, oh, it's all coming back to me now. But anyway, I'm here, so it must have been okay. So one of my particular passions and one of the things that brought me to Dalnacardoch was deer management, and that's something I've always focused my career around. But I can't begin to tell you the importance of when, shortly after I'd started, I asked Kevin what did he have in the way of records about deer. And he handed me decades worth of immaculate deer and larder records from the management and culling of deer. So absolute gold dust. And he said, nobody had ever asked him for it before. So, he's a good guy. And the humble integrity demonstrated by Kevin's work is absolutely second to none. And Durrell are extremely lucky to have him as part of the team. And equally is my respect for his partner, Susan. She is hard to describe, Susan. She's his right-hand woman. She's Highland pony handler expert and trainer. She's soup maker. She's caretaker. She's a deer pony exhibitor, breeder, shoulder to cry on, absolutely everything, in fact, that a good colleague represents. So we have the utmost respect for the couple's near 40 years of working knowledge of the estate, and we're really very wholeheartedly grateful for what has been a very welcoming attitude that they've had, a very open-minded attitude when presented with what is a transformational change for the estate. And personally, I believe that Durrell have clearly demonstrated that value in people by retaining Kevin and Susan, but also in making them integral to Durrell's learning, planning, and decision-making. And although we were fairly sad to lose a member of staff last spring, Callum Gillis, almost at the same time, we recruited our ecologist, Sam Buckland. So Sam's not here tonight, so he's not going to get too embarrassed. I'm going to talk about challenges in a wee while, but Sam is the living proof that nothing is insurmountable. So I'm going to give you some of Sam's vital statistics. 32 fixed location vegetation quadrats, 40 bioacoustic points, 125 fixed point photography locations, and 74 herbivore impact assessment plots. This guy's a machine, honestly. Having arrived at Dalnacardoch on the 1st of May this year to take up his post, he has conquered a really impressive raft of surveying and baselining work for the estate. And he continues to work really proactively every day to establish relationships, expand his network, his knowledge and his understanding, and explore how we may be able to align our objectives at Dalnacardoch to bring scale and integrity to our work, as well as support Kevin and Susan in their roles. But as we already know, behind every good man is a good woman. And in relocating to Scotland from Sussex, Sam's really able partner, Lucy Groves, came too. Lucy has already been working with Durrell for, I think, over 5 years, and she's our UK Field Programmes Manager. So her arrival at Dalnacardoch has undoubtedly strengthened the team and the resource and its ability. So to the estate. In many ways, Dalnacardoch typifies our Scottish wilderness, a wide, open landscape, seemingly unspoiled. Queen Victoria travelled through the Pass of Dromorter by train in 1873 and remarked that it was fine and wild, but terribly desolate and devoid of woods and inhabitations, and so veiled by mist and now beating rain. That hasn't changed. You could use that on a tourist postcard nowadays. It's absolutely not changed. But on closer inspection and understanding, of course, we appreciate that today's landscape has been shaped by many influences over time. And a presentation of this length will in no way do justice to describing the ways that man has lived in and shaped this landscape. Land uses that transcend subsistence living to national economies, feudalism to land reform, and now trying to address global issues. It has been absolutely crucial that we take time to interpret the estate's past before we begin to consider its future. In doing so, the richness of the place has come alive, with anecdotal stories from the entire social spectrum of people who have passed through and enjoyed Dalnacardoch for many reasons. We have surveyed and identified historical sites and studied old maps in an effort to understand influences on land use and occupation and appreciate that social fabric that the landscape has supported over time. We have consulted with neighbours and communities, and we will continue to do so. But to understand the past will inform its future. And I think, as Andy had alluded to, understanding that policy framework in Scotland is really important in interpreting Dalnacardoch. And, you know, despite those good intentions of post-war policies for the country's desire to be more self-sustaining in terms of food and timber, we now know that some of those policy-driven land uses have been perhaps to the detriment of much of our upland environment. As is typical of so many estates, these policy initiatives have been grasped in an effort to secure economic sustainability, but at the expense of environmental sustainability. Dalnacardoch has relied heavily upon sporting land use and has been limited in its ability to diversify commercially. One small blessing is that these different land uses have helped to some extent underpinning some social sustainability in rural communities, these remote rural communities which still exist across the Cairngorms. And that's helped safeguard tradition, culture, and skills in those rural people who live there. So looking to the future, we need to achieve a far more resilient equation for sustainability. And so to the challenges. So 2024 at Dalnacardoch, we've seen a wide range of survey work and ground truthing being carried out. And that's going to help us design our plans for restoration. But the complexity of this project has begun to become clear, and it will not be without challenge. Dalnacardoch is not devoid of wildlife, but our baseline studying this season has begun to enrich our understanding of what we do have. It does lack in the diversity of species and the extent of habitat that we would like to see across our uplands. And where I have spoken about the economic and the social legacies of some of our rural land use policies, it is perhaps the environmental legacy that now presents some of our greatest challenges. So I'm going to highlight some of these for you now. So if we focus on peatland, and we have a significant area of peatland at Dalnacardoch. There's almost 2/3 of the estate is covered by peat. This is quite significantly eroded. Peatland has suffered from changing land use over many decades. It was significantly drained to improve pasture quality for livestock farming, and it was also followed by an agricultural support system that led to exacerbated grazing pressures. Erosion has dried out the deep layers of peat, letting water drain more rapidly from the landscape, with the resulting effects felt both locally in terms of species loss on Blanket Bog, but also regionally in terms of flood risk and catchment health and resilience. Commercial woodland is also a legacy we have of the old times at Dalnacardoch, and we have an area of non-native woodland planted for timber production. It's unsympathetic to the landscape, to watercourses and to biodiversity. And now it has been a victim to windblow damage, which reduces further the timber value and it makes it difficult to harvest. So uniform in age and species and character, it offers limited habitat for plants, animals, and bird species. Grazing pressures are a familiar issue across our uplands, and historical regimes for the management of deer and sheep have impacted on the extent of native woodland across the estate. Grazing pressures have meant that native woodland has been suppressed, and only remnant trees survive in those areas which are inaccessible to grazing animals. It is also that matter of distance that species have to travel between habitats to be able to have a foothold that is a limiting factor to their success. That word remnant is so well applied to the fragmented remains of isolated and lonely species in our uplands, and is fairly typical of what we see at Dalnacardoch. There are, of course, many reasons why those species have become marginalised, and we will work to understand how we can see them reinstated and flourish once again. But that list of marginalised species is not exclusive to flora and fauna, but people too. And we know that Dalnacardoch needs to provide for people and social and economic resilience in our local communities. So those are the challenges, and they are significant, and I've only touched on a few of them. But what is our vision, and what do we hope to do here? So I've explained the background to the estate and those challenges, but now to our vision. We want to restore that area of 18,500 acres at Dalnacardoch within the Cairngorms National Park over the next 100 years. For Durrell, this is an unmissable opportunity to apply our world-leading skills in saving species and reviving complex ecosystems to a landscape in the British Isles, to demonstrate bold conservation in action closer to home. We will breathe life back into this land. We will restore habitats and ecological processes, recover those iconic missing species, and nurture a strong emotional connection where people are part of their wild and diverse environment. But partnering with local communities and organisations, we will transition the degraded land to a more flourishing and diverse landscape, resilient to climate change and benefiting local people. But how are we going to do that? What we want to see is that greater mosaic across our landscape, a mosaic of peat bogs, moorland, montane habitat, Scots pine forest, all those things that Andy was boasting about that we want to see of greater extent and greater richness within the national park. A restored river system fringed with riparian woodland. Natural grazing and browsing, plus the restoration of hydrological processes, will help regenerate these ecosystems. In time, a multitude of species, many iconic, that once belonged to this land will recolonise rejuvenated habitat or be introduced. This project marks a natural evolution for Durrell. Drawing on our extensive international experience in species reintroduction, land management, and community engagement, we aim to reassemble an intact piece of Scottish uplands. By showcasing ambitious, large-scale habitat restoration, we can train more conservation professionals on site and inspire local people and visitors to explore and reconnect with our native biodiversity, to immerse themselves in the land as it should be, a home for people and wildlife. So how will we deliver those different elements across the estate? For peatland, we will create a healthier and more diverse peatland and moorland that will play its own role in climate change mitigation, bolstering biodiversity, and being key to wider ecosystem service. We can restore the peatland by blocking drains and reinstating vegetation cover on areas of bare peat. In re-wetting that peat layer, that locks up carbon and halts its release. We will account for the needs of the water abstraction for the generation of clean energies and the responsibilities to that wider river ecosystem. But most importantly, we will restore that habitat to be able to support a far richer biodiversity of flora and fauna. The monitoring that we will carry out across all habitats will measure that evolving success of key indicator species and assemblages. We want to overcome the lack of woodland cover at Dalnacardoch, and we'll do that through different ways. Through natural regeneration of woodland, through the establishment of new woodland, and by restructuring the existing commercial plantation. The existing plantation we can remodel and restructure, and replace those non-native species with native trees through a rolling programme that will give us a multi-structural woodland and a more diverse forest, more host to a larger biodiversity of native plants, insects and bird species. We want to be able to achieve greater extent and diversity through increased woodland cover. And we will promote regeneration from native seed source for key tree and shrub species like aspen and montane willow scrub. And through the creation and planting of native woodland, we can ensure to plant the right tree in the right place. Native woodland will gradually re-emerge in the landscape over the next few decades. But most importantly, through integrating plans for peatland and woodland and river systems, that really rich mosaic of habitats will begin to evolve, and with it, that increasing biodiversity in flora and fauna. These rivers of arteries and burns that we have, we really want to see them reclaimed with that lovely native woodland on their banks. And through identifying and locating parent tree remnants, we can support and revitalise the seedling opportunities for natural regeneration and promote that colonisation by our native woods. Through alleviating grazing pressures, we will see the natural tree line frontier creep further up the hill. We would really like to see the River Edendon released of its constraints, freed from these infrastructural barriers that exist, to enjoy that naturalised floodplain that its energy wants to have and express, properly braided streams shaded by tree and scrub, and offering the protection from rising temperatures like Andy alluded to earlier. Although the population of deer has reduced quite significantly in our part of the world over recent years, we will need to work hard and carefully continue to reduce numbers further, to reduce those grazing effects and release native woodland regeneration at scale. That will require great effort, close collaboration, and the maintaining of good standards of practice and welfare throughout. We recognise our wider responsibilities here to the entire deer range and to our neighbours. Deer remain an integral part of our uplands, and we will work to ensure management in their best interests in both the short and the long term. But beyond our own four walls at Dalnacardoch, the opportunities are immense. And reflecting on what Andy shared with us earlier, you can really begin to see the significant opportunity that Dalnacardoch presents for that wider landscape. I'm showing here the slide, obviously, that Andy had also shown earlier, but in that context for Dalnacardoch. And occupying that key geographical location, Dalnacardoch offers the potential to create those major nature networks. This map outlines those river catchments within the national park. And what we can explore at Dalnacardoch is the potential to link those catchments of the Spey and the Tay through the Gaich Pass. And that will be one of the main outcomes that we will strive to achieve at Dalnacardoch. In time, the size and location of Dalnacardoch would allow these networks to really express their value to a huge range of native species of bird, plant, and animal, and provide that highway. So above all, Dalnacardoch brings scale, 18,500 acres, to already shared goals for landscape scale restoration across contiguous estates in the Cairngorms. But beyond scale, we can also bring integrity through our established conservation and science teams. So often, land use has evolved in Scotland with key wildlife species fairly peripheral to objective. But that has seen a distinct change in recent years. There is no better way to demonstrate and learn than when we have good knowledge and integrity in our data. And we will use that robust basis of monitoring and science to underpin our decisions. And that is what Durrell can bring to Dalnacardoch. But above all, in delivering a meaningful landscape restoration project, we hope to establish a resource for people to work in, to learn from, and to enjoy. Building on our conservation training abilities, we want to develop a facility at Dalnacardoch to deliver education and training in conservation, land use, and rural skills. And if anybody really wants me to bend their ear about that and find out how passionate I am about that, then see me afterwards. We also plan to build a visitor centre at Dalnacardoch and associated visitor accommodation to offer that greater opportunity for people to connect in depth with nature, to learn from Dalnacardoch, the land, its history, and its role in the future. I said to somebody the other day that what Dalnacardoch can do is offer local solutions to global problems. And I think, trying to avoid politics, but you're right, Monty. So if, like me, you like these wide open spaces and the sounds of birds and wildlife and the sights that we're really fortunate to capture through the binoculars when you're sat alone and at peace in these places, you will appreciate what a really special place Dalnacardoch is. And, I want to share that experience with people so that they too can be enriched by its character, respect its making, appreciate the purity and the subtle qualities of life that it offers, and hence understand the importance of this landscape, both at local and global scale. So we hope that you've enjoyed our lecture, our film and speakers this evening, and are really beginning to feel inspired about how you can help revive Dalnacardoch and make our vision a reality. We hope too that we have demonstrated the unique opportunity that we have here to recover this magnificent landscape for future generations and to reconnect with Scotland's native biodiversity. A gift from you tonight would enable us to plan for the future, source additional funding to start to restore this important piece of the Scottish Highlands for both people and wildlife. You can donate this evening by scanning the QR code. And I'm quite sure there's some people picking up their phones I can see, although these bright lights do dazzle me a little bit, so that's fantastic. This is a 100-year journey, but it really begins now. It's been a real pleasure for me to support Durrell in understanding the estate in the early stages of this project, and that's what I'm about. I hope you too will be inspired by the project at Dalnacardoch and the potential that it has to create a real legacy in our Scottish uplands. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Deirdre. And as Deirdre mentioned, that concludes the formal part of this evening. Thank you so much for coming. The Durrell team will be hanging around outside if you want to come up and have a chat and find out how to donate and how to get involved in this project and, of course, many, many other projects as well. It strikes me that today, as a conservationist, an environmentalist, anyone who is a stakeholder, passionate about the natural world, we need to be resolute and we need to be defiant. And of course, that includes everyone in this room. Otherwise, you wouldn't be here if you didn't have that passion for looking after this type of environment and this sort of place. So we need to be resolute. We need to be defiant. We need to be patient as well. And this project, spanning a century, is a perfect manifestation of that. There's a great Maori expression that says, "Be a good ancestor, plant trees you'll never see." And that is epitomized by this project. The future, as of today, in conservation terms, is uncertain, but it's also unwritten. And if we're lucky, we get to walk alongside people who genuinely shape landscapes and genuinely make the natural world a better place. So we hope you found this evening inspiring. And I'm going to finish off with one last expression, one last quote. Margaret Mead said, "Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed individuals can change the world. In fact, it's the only thing that ever has." And it's been absolutely wonderful tonight to spend an evening in a room with a fair few of them. So thank you very much and safe journey home.